part of the award-winning series Profiles in Literature, featuring interviews with persons prominent in American literature for children. The moderator of this series is Dr. Jaqueline Shachter Weiss.
Profiles in Literature is delighted to present the outstanding author of books for young people, Dr. Donna Jo Napoli. In your autobiography, you wrote that as a Radcliffe College student, you had a course in writing with a Harvard professor. Why did he phone you at your dorm?
Actually, all Radcliffe courses were at Harvard. There was no Radcliffe faculty. And I had taken the required expository writing course my freshman year. And I had handed in the first fiction writing assignment of the semester. We'd had several other assignments. And he called me to tell me that I really ought to be a novelist. And I quickly decided I was never going to take any more English courses because I did not want to be a starving writer.
But that was a rare tribute to you. I've never heard of it happening to anyone else.
Well, it isn't as though he was a very famous person. He was teaching the introductory expository writing class.
But that's great. With us is my colleague, Dr. James Holton, former Norristown Area School District Superintendent, who joins the discussion.
It's a pleasure to be here this morning with you, Dr. Napoli. After writing so many wonderful books, do you use an agent in your publishing of those books?
I don't. I had an agent at one point before I published anything, and she didn't sell anything, and she advised me to make changes in my work that probably would have not been a good idea, so I parted ways. So I don't have an agent. But actually, at the moment, I have just signed up with an agent for my adult work.
I noticed in reading some of your books that you use different publishers, and why is that?
I started out working with a treasure of an editor at Dutton, and I never thought I'd ever work with anyone else. But then I did a book called Song of the Magdalene, which is set in Israel in the 1st century, and it was not something that Dutton wanted to do. And in fact, many people advised me not to publish it at all. But I'm very good friends with a really famous local writer, Lloyd Alexander, and I called up Lloyd, and he, who has advised me on many times, a very wise man, said, don't let anybody ever tell you what sort of thing you should write. You know, if you want to write religious fiction, which was what this was, do it. If you want to write erotica, do it. You know, write what you have to write. And so I submitted it to another publisher. And then that was Scholastic. And then the editor that I worked with at Scholastic, I worked with her for 3 years, and then she moved to Simon & Schuster. So I've continued with Scholastic, but then I picked up Simon & Schuster. And I write so many different sorts of things that I don't believe it would be possible to find a single editor that would like everything I wrote.
What rules or guidelines do you use in writing for children?
Oh, I use a lot of rules, but I don't know if they're necessarily about writing for children. I think they're more just about writing. One of my rules is, you know, write what you know about, but I interpret that to mean go out and learn something. So I write about all sorts of things. I do a lot of research. Another is write about something important, but I interpret that to mean as long as you understand the importance of something for your character, you can write about the teeniest thing. Just treat it with respect, and it can be very important.
Why do you choose to write for various ages and for different genres?
I don't really choose that. I just write. I write my story. I don't think about who it's for. I write it the best way I know how to write it. And then I show it to an editor, and the editors tell me, this is for so-and-so. And sometimes they ask me to make changes that might make it more appropriate for who they think the right audience is. But I never think about my audience as I'm writing.
You endured an early period of publisher rejections.
Oh, yes.
Okay. What was key to your eventual success?
learning the difference between fiction and reality. When I started, I spent 14 long years of getting letters of rejection before I finally sold something. And I did what a lot of people do. I would write a story about two little kids who went to the zoo with their mother and watched how the animals walked and mimicked how the animals walked. And lo and behold, that day I had gone to the zoo with my children and we had watched how the animals walked and mimicked how the animals walked. You know, your own children are fascinating to you, but not to anyone else. Everybody else wants a story. And it wasn't until I recognized that stories were what people were after that I started selling.
I see. On the lighter side, have you ever had humorous fan mail?
Oh, yes, I've had some great fan mail.
Well, just tell us about one.
I
Sure.
got one letter that said, "You are the best author I've ever written to, and the only."
That's honest.
It was a great
Dr.
letter.
Napoli heads the linguistics department at Swarthmore College. In addition to 9 books in linguistics, how many books for young people have you created?
Actually, I don't know the number. It's certainly in the mid-30s somewhere.
That's great. From time to time, we'll show the jackets of some of your books that photograph well. I especially liked the way you showed linguistic knowledge in Beast, your version of Beauty and the Beast. School Library Journal judged Beast as best book of 2000. What's the intended age of Beast readers?
Beast has explicit sexuality in it. It is in the context of profound love, but because of that, I would say that this is a high school book.
Okay, YA, young adult. I think you're most successful when the original fairy tale has a happy ending, as in Beauty and the Beast. Now consider your version of fairy tales where the original ending is not entirely happy. The protagonist in an American Library Association Best Book for Young Adults, The Magic Circle, is a hunchbacked witch who is kind in over half of the book. Isn't her character change sudden when she meets Hansel, though she is somewhat civil still to Gretel?
I think that she is always who she is. It's just that the demons have taken her over, and there's this internal struggle, this kind of crucial struggle that everybody goes through. You know, how much are you willing to give up in order to be a decent person? And it is particularly difficult for her because the demons are living inside her head.
Oh. Well, you've also shown Rumpelstiltskin sympathetically in Spinners. But after a hard life, he loses a leg in the end. Are your endings always faithful to the original fairy tale endings?
Absolutely, and I want to say that that book I co-authored with Richard Chen. It's the only novel that I've co-authored, and it is the only novel I will ever co-author. It was very difficult to co-author a novel. However, we have written picture books together, and our first math picture book just came out.
Oh,
So,
well, that's exciting. Your self-written fairy tale, The Prince of the Pond, otherwise known as The Fog Pin, and its sequel, Jimmy, the Pickpocket of the Palace, are unique. What inspired The Prince of the Pond with its frog language?
with its frog language, well, that's linguistics. I mean,
I know.
if you had a frog,
know.
yes, if you were turned into a frog, your tongue would be very long, and it would be attached right here, in the inside of your bottom jaw, but at the front. Your human tongue is attached much further back, so you would have a serious speech impediment, no doubt about it. So I made my frog essentially a non-palatal frog.
I love it. I love it. You're very successful in your first picture book, Albert. Where does that take place?
I don't know. Albert, I just wrote this story. I'm a very unvisual person. And I just wrote the story having no sense of where it was at all. But the illustrator did marvelous things.
Oh, yes.
And there's a bicycle in it that is totally European. And there's a woman walking down the street with a baguette under her arm. And so I now think of the book as Albert, you know.
French.
This is no longer Albert.
Did you select the illustrator yourself, Jim LaMarche, I believe his name is?
Jim LaMarche, he's fabulous, yes. No, I did not select him. What happened was the editor for that book, Paula Wiseman, showed me some work by a few artists, two of which were kind of breathtaking, and she asked if I was interested in either one, and what my preference was. Well, I'm not a visual person, and I said, oh, Paula, they're both fabulous, you choose. And Paula went to Jim, and I think Paula made a brilliant choice.
Yes, she did.
After Albert's hands become a cupped cardinal's nest, it's clever to end with Albert pictured on a stomach flying on a moving swing and a cardinal atop of his head. Whose idea was this picture?
The picture was Jim LaMarche's idea, and we all talked, though, about whether that was the right solution, because the book has everything that a person could do if you relax about, will you have the stamina? Will you have to stand at a window for 12 days with your hand out the window? Will you have the stamina? What do you do about going to the bathroom? All of these other issues. If you will lay them aside, an ordinary person could do them, but an ordinary person can't fly. So how do you handle those final words? And Paula and Jim and I talked, and that was Jim's solution, and both Paula and I
Very
clapped.
clever.
I feel very bad at this point because I have mentioned Paula Wiseman, and I haven't mentioned the editors for the other two books that we've talked about, and both of them are absolutely wonderful editors as well. Brenda Bowen was the editor for Beast, and Caitlin DeLuey as well, and they're both fantastic editors. Brenda was my editor at Scholastic, and Lucia Monfried has the editor for all my Dutton books.
You can't give credit to all. You're successful when you write historical materials such as Stones in Water, a Holocaust tale that won the 1997 Golden Kite Award. Was this tale based on fact?
Yes and no. I met a man, Guido Fulin is a friend of mine who lives in Venice. He's an older man, and he was taken earlier in the war. I have this boy be taken from a movie theater in the summer of 1942 and brought up to Germany and then Poland and then Ukraine to work for the war effort. Guido was taken probably in the summer of 38 or 39, earlier, and he was gone from home for a whole 5 years. When I heard what had happened to Guido, it was the first time I'd ever heard of children being taken by the Germans, particularly from an ally. It seemed very surprising to me, and so I started doing research on it, and I found out that boys were taken from Italy, Poland, Hungary, Bulgaria, and Romania. Boys may have been taken from other places too, but I found materials in the archives of the International Red Cross in Geneva.
Okay. I was deeply moved by that book, as were other readers. I do appreciate the difficulties you had in writing Spinners with another co-author, but you did accomplish a great job there. Your book, Zell, based on Rapunzel, was chosen by the American Booksellers Association in 1996 as a pick of the list. In Zell, you present separate chapters from Zell, her mother, and her admirer, Conrad. Similarly, in Cyrena, you have separate chapters from Cyrena and from her lover. Is Cyrena a combination of the three sirens?
No, I don't think so. She's just this very sweet mermaid. When I was a high schooler, I loved Latin. Everybody else loved the Odyssey. I loved the Iliad. The Iliad is a story of what is honor. what does it mean to be loyal. The Odyssey is a great adventure. I've always been much more interested in why people do things than in what they do. And the Iliad, even though it's a war story, is about why people do things. And so Sirena was an opportunity for me to tell the story of the Iliad, essentially, but from the point of view of a mermaid.
It's well done. It's very well done.
In Crazy Jack, your version of Jack the Giant Killer, Jack does not kill the giant, while in Hallowell's 1711 version, the boy does kill him. Why did you let the giant live?
Well, he does come crashing to the ground. I do mean to stay true, faithful to the original.
Well, in any case, Crazy Jack is a story with a happy ending, and I would imagine be very, very
well,
popular.
I built into it a love story. I built into it. When people do desperate things, like climb a vine up into the sky, which you know has to be dangerous, there's got to be reasons why they do it. And of course, when a mother says sell our only cow, you know there's desperate poverty. But so poverty is driving things, but poverty is not as overwhelming. It is overwhelming, but it's not as overwhelming as poverty and love. And so I wanted Jack to have something that he was yearning for beyond just survival. And so I built in the love story.
Now, just to change the line of questions and answers a little bit, where in your house do you compose your books?
My desk is right beside the washing machine and the dryer. So I guess you could call it my laundry room. And it's very useful because if I hit a point where I just don't know what to do next, I get up, I do a load of laundry. If it's a good day, I hang it outside. It's a nice break, and then I get right back to my computer.
Do you use a word processor?
I do.
You do.
You're mighty busy. Let's put it mildly. Do you have a family?
I do. I have 5 children.
Oh, that's wonderful.
They are now grown. My youngest one is 16.
Oh, I've talked with her on the phone, and she's charming. What is the occupation of your older children? Or are the occupations? What are the occupations?
My oldest daughter is Elena. She is a doctor at Beth Israel Hospital in Manhattan.
Great.
My oldest son is Michael. He and his wife Noelle are graduate students in the sciences. He's getting a PhD in chemistry, and she's getting a PhD in biomedical sciences. And
where are they?
they're at Harvard. And my next son, Nick, is essentially a sculptor. He does design, and he's living in Milano in Italy. And he just graduated from college in June. And my daughter, Eva, who you talked to, who sounds very young, but she's actually not my youngest. She is a junior in college, majoring in biology, and she wants to be a veterinarian. But both of my daughters are wonderful artists, and Eva did the illustrations in The Bravest Thing. And,
she did?
Yeah, and Elena did the maps in 4 of my books. So yeah, they're really lovely artists.
Oh, they're family affairs.
And then my youngest son is a junior in high school, Robert.
Oh, that's tremendous. 2 of your children are portrayed in Trouble on the Tracks, an exciting story. Why did you set it in Australia?
We had been to Australia. We've spent 2 summers in Australia, and the first summer that we were there, I think it was '92. I'm not really sure. I think that's when it was. I was teaching at the University of Queensland in Brisbane, and we stayed longer than just my teaching term, and we did some traveling around, and we took a train from Alice Springs down to Adelaide. It's called the Ghan. It's there are two really famous, wonderful trains in Australia, and that's one of them. I made actually, we went from Adelaide to Alice Springs. In the book, I made the train in the trip in the opposite direction. But while we were there that summer, I was overwhelmed by the birds. The birds of Australia are magnificent, especially the galahs. They're pink on one side and gray on the other, so that when they spread their wings, and you'll see a cloud of gray and then a cloud of pink. It's just beautiful. But a ring of bird nappers was uncovered that summer, and it's a big problem in Australia. People steal the birds and ship them out to rich people all around the world who would like to have an exotic bird from Australia. And a lot of them die in the process. So, and my son Nick and my daughter Eva, they're only a year and a half apart, and it was always when they were young an issue for them. And I used that book to
bring them together.
Yes, to bring them together. They are now extremely close. But they're adults
that's an
now.
exciting book, and I thought it was my discovery because it's not as well touted as some of the other books. You organize family vacations often around your work or that of your husband. So where have you been?
We've been all over. We have the rule that we can go anywhere we want in the summer. Both my husband and I are academics, as long as the summer pays for itself. Because we are academics, we don't have a lot of extra money. And so we have gone everywhere. Well, not everywhere. We've been to Australia twice. Once I worked, another summer my husband worked. We've been to China, where I taught at a university in Beijing. We've been to Indonesia and to Singapore and to Hong Kong on the way to China. We've been to Europe many times. I've taught at the University of Geneva, and my husband has run international programs in law in Italy several times, many, many times. We've been to South Africa. I did some work at 2 universities in South Africa.
I think your children are very lucky.
We've been to South America.
That's what I think.
And we've been to Peru.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Why did you write When the Water Closes Over My Head?
That is about a boy named Mikey who is extremely aware of his mortality. And I used my oldest son, Michael, as the model for this child. Michael was just born knowing that he was going to die. And when he was a little boy, on the playground, when he was 2 and 3 and 4, he would climb to the top of the ladder for the slide and look down it and then climb back down. He was just very aware that everything was dangerous, and swimming was a real issue for him. So I used that. But the scenes in it are made up.
That was one of my favorite books of yours, by the way. I
Thank
enjoyed
you.
that immensely.
Thank
and
you.
even related to it
Yeah.
myself.
I should tell people When the Water Closes Over My Head is out of print. However, Scholastic has just put it back into paperback.
Good.
So
Great.
it's not in Dutton anymore.
Who inspired the bravest thing about breeding rabbits?
The bravest thing is really about my daughter, Eva. Eva has always wanted to be a veterinarian since she was really little. She's worked in veterinary clinics, and she worked in the London Zoo. She's worked all around the world in different clinics. And she raised rabbits for a while. We had so many rabbits. She supplied rabbits for every kindergarten class within many, many miles of our home. And we have had dogs and cats and birds, many things because of Eva, but that book was about her. That book is particularly dear to me because the girl in it is dealing with a mother rabbit who abandons her litters, and she has many things to deal with, but at the same time the family is dealing with the fact that the mother's sister, the aunt who the little girl loves very much, is very sick with cancer, and my sister was dying of cancer as I wrote that book. So the feelings of my children, the complications of the family were built into the book. That book also is out of print. However, Scholastic has put it back into print in paperback.
Very good. What prompted your sensitive story about divorce changing tunes?
That was not based on my family. I'm very lucky, but my oldest son, Michael, it seemed when he was in middle school all of his friends' families wound up separating. There were a lot of divorces going on, and one of his friends in particular, Zach, used to play the trumpet with his father. They'd play duets all the time. Well, when his father left the house, he lost a lot. And so I have learned my lesson. As I said, there's a difference between fiction and reality. So I didn't make it a boy in middle school. I made it a girl in elementary school. I didn't make it the trumpet. I made it the piano. I didn't make it that she played with her father. I made it that she played and her father played, but she played really well and won all sorts of awards. And what happens to this little girl is she comes home from school knowing that all her father's things will be gone because her parents are very enlightened and they have prepared her for this divorce. And she walks in and the family piano is gone, and she has never thought of it as her father's. And so, and divorce is like this. You think you've prepared your child, but there are always losses that you can't anticipate. And so I was really writing the hearts of the children that were my oldest son's friends.
One of the things I most admire about your books, I think, is that you tackle head-on the crises in children's lives, but if they stick to it and keep at it, they can still realize joy and what have you, and see through those difficulties.
Yeah, I don't try to give a message in terms of you can win. I like to leave children, well, that is one way in which I feel a responsibility toward children as opposed to adults. When I write for children, I like to leave them with the sense that you may not be able to change your world, but with goodwill and fortitude, you will be able to find a way to live decently within your world. That's an optimism that I feel a responsibility for when I write for children. And I don't feel that responsibility writing for adults.
What are some of the books that you have written but have not been published yet?
Oh, a lot. Some of them are going to be, and some of them are just hopeful at the moment. I have the third story in there's the Prince of the Pond, Jimmy the Pickpocket of the Palace, and I'm trying to write the third story to make it be a trilogy.
Well,
Yeah.
that's nice.
In Jimmy the Pickpocket of the Palace, did you have any character you were particularly interested in?
Oh, I loved that book.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I can't pick it apart.
Well, I love Gracie. Gracie, that crazy little clumsy frog. So the third book is Gracie's story, and it's a love story, and it's a story about interspecies conflicts. So because the guy she's in love with is half frog and half person. So there's an issue there.
Yes,
Yeah, a major issue. I'm also working on I do believe Dutton's going to do that book, but we haven't signed a contract yet. And I am working on a book about a boy who lives in Mount Pleasant, which is an area of Washington, D.C., where I lived for many years. And he runs away from home, and he goes to the Arctic. And it's an adventure story, and it's not under contract yet, but I hope it will be. And I'm working on a story, another myth, about Pan. And I'm
That'll
hoping
be
that will
interesting.
happen. Actually, that's under contract, but it's always a struggle till you've reached the final version.
I agree. I agree.
Okay, you've answered one of my questions, and that was about your future writing plans, and I'm going to turn that over now to Jackie Weiss here.
I want to ask you if there's anything you want to add. We've really posed questions to you, and I wanted to give you a little leeway. Is there anything you wanted to add? I know you recently came back from San Antonio, Texas, and you were teaching students in schools there. Did you learn anything that you can summarize very briefly, because our time is almost over?
Well, actually, it's amazing that you said that, because while I was there, a wonderful librarian, Bev Golden, at Hubner University, Hubner Elementary School, told me that she has been reading my book, Albert, to children all the time since September 11th, with a new take on it, because Albert is about a person who stays at home and finds the outside world extremely frightening. And he learns to accept that there are dangers and there are wonders outside, and it's worth it to go outside. It's terrible to think that anyone would be worried that children are becoming Alberts, but she feels like it's really helpful now to children who are so worried.
I like that take
Yeah.
on that book, because I know both Jim and I are fond of that book. I think we are really about over. Our cosmopolitan guest, Donna Jo Napoli, has learned how to capture young people's emotions, varying from picture and chapter books like this one. This is a tiny chapter book, to this part of the Angel Wings series, to old fairy tales and modern stories. She's a prize winner who sparkles with new ideas. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
About over. Our cosmopolitan guest, Donna Jo Napoli, has learned how to capture young people's emotions, varying from picture and chapter books like this one. This is a tiny chapter book, to this part of the Angel Wings series, to old fairy tales and modern stories. She's a prize winner who sparkles with new ideas. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.